My name is Dominique Duarte. Welcome to Southern Girl in the City. I am a singer-actor currently living in Brooklyn, New York. So this week was pretty solid. I went to rehearsals for the Fire Ensemble. I went to two rehearsals this week, I believe, or just one. I think it was one. Sorry, the days are kind of running together, honestly, because a lot of the days I'm doing two things at once. Like I'm going to my first job and then going to rehearsal or going to my second job. Um, I went to my pastor's house, my former pastor's house in Long Island for Thanksgiving. It was really great to spend time with her family. She's really a great influence in my life, and I think that she really cares a lot, which is great. Um, I don't really go home for Thanksgiving or Christmas, well, for multiple reasons. Financially, it's really expensive for me to fly to Memphis. The last time I went to Memphis was for my friend's wedding. Um, and even then, I think it was like $600. I never used to pay that much for my flights to Memphis. Like it used to be, I could find flights for like 2 to 250, and now the flights are just really high. So there's one reason. Another reason is that I love my family, but I also don't really know them that well. And I feel like they don't really know me that well. And they may know me as child Dominique, but as far as being adult Dominique, not so much. But this could be pretty common. A lot of families don't really, they always see you as a kid, I guess. And I don't really feel like I connect with my family. And I think I've kind of felt that most of my life. Um, and so being around them can be really challenging for me. I don't know, the last Christmas that I spent at home, I remember I take that back. The last Christmas I spent before I moved to New York was kind of challenging for me because I realized that I just really didn't connect. And how is it that I could connect with friends, but I have such a hard time connecting with my family? And then I did this writing exercise on Saturday. Was it not this past Saturday, but last Saturday? I did this writing class because I want to write a one woman show, and I've been really slow about writing one. There's an idea that I had in my mind as to what I wanted to write, but then the teacher had us do this exercise where we talked about a memorable Thanksgiving. It was like a memorable holiday. And I ended up going back to a holiday from when my grandmother was alive. And I didn't realize that my family might have been more connected when she was alive. And I think that I felt more a part of my family when she was alive. And I think that I actually learned that I just realized that I didn't really fully grieve my grandmother's passing. My grandmother passed when I was a freshman in high school, and she got sick when I was 12 years old. And other than my mother and my stepfather, she's the one that I spent, her and my grandfather, really her more because my grandfather worked a lot. And as soon as he retired, she got sick. So, like, technically, I spent a lot of time with him, but I really spent most of my time with my grandmother. From the time that my parents divorced to when I was 4 years old, the person that I stayed with every day was my grandmother. It was just her and me. And then there were a lot of people that lived in the house, but they all had school or work. But it was me and her. And then whenever my mom went out of town, because my mom's a performer, then I would stay with my grandparents or I stay with my aunt and her kids, but usually I would stay with my grandmother. I actually was supposed to be staying with them or was going to stay with them for the summer that she got sick. I was staying at their house. And then she had an appointment the following week, and during that appointment, they told her she needed to go into the hospital and that she needed to have heart surgery. And for some reason, she didn't end up having it. I remember visiting her the day that she was supposed to have it, and them saying they were going to reschedule it. And that was the last time that I saw my grandmother as the woman that I knew. And when I saw her the next time, she was not the same person that I knew. Um, and I realized as an adult that I had I never really fully grieved her death because technically she kind of died when I was 12. Even though she died when I was 15 physically, I felt like she kind of passed when I was 12 years old because and a 12-year-old doesn't know how to process grief, but she probably was the person I was the closest with and I also spent the most time with. Um, and when my friend passed away in college, I remember being really, really, really upset about it. And I cried and cried and cried. And I do feel like I was old enough to process that because I was 23. But I just realized I'm 35 and I don't think I ever really fully processed my grandmother's illness. Um, and the memory that I had or that I wrote down was I felt, my family was there. My aunt and her kids were there. I was there. My grandparents were there. One of my mother has a sibling who has autism, and I feel like sometimes he's not really acknowledged, but he was there. I would see him more frequently when my grandmother was alive. I would see him during the holidays. He would visit from his school, and honestly, I haven't seen him since my grandmother's funeral, which was in 2005. Um, and this was even before I moved to New York. Like, I never really saw him much. Um, but yeah, it's interesting how grief works because I had watched this movie about Natalie Cole, and Natalie lost her dad when she was in ninth grade, too, actually. And when she was an adult and she was struggling with drugs and she finally went to the rehab the second time, the person was telling her, did you ever grieve? And she was like, well, yeah, of course I did. But she didn't. She hadn't grieved. And that's part of the reason she ended up struggling with drugs in the first place, was because she hadn't grieved. Losing my grandmother really was the equivalent of almost losing a parent because of how much time I was with her. And I felt like she saw me, and sometimes I feel like I'm not really fully seen, and it's kind of hard. I always think, well, oh, you're not being supported, but that's not completely true. I think that I am very supported by friends. I mean, people have been really supportive of me, but sometimes I forget that because I'm just expecting it from my family, and I just don't receive it. And I think that it's not intentional. I just think one of the things that is never really discussed in Black history is what effect did Jim Crow and slavery have on the Black family dynamic? And I think it had a lot of generational trauma. And I think that I'm definitely a product of generational trauma. And I was talking with a friend who was telling me, she was like, sometimes the person is the carrier of all of the things that other people have gone through. And there's a part of me that does feel that, because sometimes I feel like I'm the only one that's seeing things. And it's like everybody else is kind of ignoring it. It's like there's elephants in the room and nobody's saying anything. And I don't get it. Like, just be honest. And I've always been a pretty authentic person, but sometimes I'm not feeling the authenticity within my family. And I kind of have felt that since I was about 4 or 5, 6. Like, I was a child and I could always feel people's energies, and something was off. And knowing a lot more than I feel like I should have. I mean, I just think my parents and my mom, as well as my grandmother, I think had a lot of trauma. And I think that a lot of the times they told me a lot of things that I maybe shouldn't have known at a young age. And it does make me hard. It does make it hard sometimes to show up in my family because I know a lot of things that I wish that I didn't know. And my mother is a well-known singer, and most people know this, some people don't. The thing about it is I never felt like I was in my mother's shadow. I never felt like I was in her shadow. But in my family, I do. I feel like I'm always her daughter first and Dominique second. And the only person I felt like that didn't treat me like that is my aunt and my grandmother and my grandfather. But yeah, I do feel like it's hard because in a black family, when someone is really, really successful, it can bring on trauma. Some of the things, like even just going to college, which should be something that is really celebrated in a family, can sometimes break families apart. I mean, in a lot of black families, going to college is a subject of contention, and in mine, it definitely was, because my mom was the only one to graduate from college, and my grandparents didn't, and her siblings did not, and I think that it just caused a lot of tension. And I don't know what the answer really is, because for me, I just feel so disconnected, and I always had. Like, this isn't a new occurrence. Like, it didn't just dawn on me. What did dawn on me is that I do think the dynamic of the family did change when my grandmother got sick. And I do feel like I may have felt more seen and included when she was alive. But when she wasn't alive anymore, everybody kind of dispersed. And the woman in the class was suggesting that I write my one woman show about my grandmother. I was like, and I hadn't really thought of that. But if I do that, I would have to really talk to my I mean the people who knew her the most, I guess, and that would probably be my grandfather as well as my great aunt. Um, because that's the thing, like I really never felt like my family really knew my mom really well, and I don't even know if everybody knew my grandmother as well. Like I think that we just have very superficial ways of dealing with one another, and I don't think any of us really know each other on a deeper level. And for me, I really cherish the relationships when I can be my authentic self and I don't have to filter on myself all the time. And I do feel like, yeah, I do feel like I kind of have to filter often. I feel like I had to just smile and say, hi, how are you all the time, and it just never feels authentic. And the weird thing is, spending Thanksgiving with my pastor's family, I feel like I am being more authentic. And it's kind of weird because I've only been around her family like 3 times. And, but even with my cousin Eric and his wife, like her family, I've always felt more comfortable with. And I don't know why. I guess because they're being more authentic. Or, and I guess maybe because there's no conditional love. Like, it's not conditional. Like, I feel like you can make a mistake and people will still show up for you. But in my family, I feel it's like you make a mistake and it's like you'll be treated differently forever. And I'm not saying that I've been on the receiving end of that, but I've definitely seen it with other relatives. And it's not about bashing my family. It's not like that. Like, I think every family has dysfunction. But I almost prefer that if the family acknowledges the dysfunction is better than just pretending that everything's fine and you're not talking out anything. If you have a problem, just say something. And I think it's hard because I try to be genuine And I think that it's just really hard for me to show up in my authenticity with my family. And I think that's why I just don't enjoy spending time with them. And I haven't really in a long time. And I think the last time I really, truly, truly, truly enjoyed my time with my family was when my grandmother was alive and she was hosting Christmas and Thanksgiving. And I was a child, but I felt like I was probably more my authentic self. And I also realized that I also kind of changed when she got sick too, because I went from being a little bit more outgoing and outspoken to being very reserved. And I don't think I just didn't realize how much it affected me. Um, and it was in subtle ways, and it wasn't like, I just didn't know it affected me the way it did. And the funny thing is, you think, well, it happened so long ago because in February of 2025, it would have been 20 years since she died. But yet, I just never really processed it. It just happened. And it happened at an age where I really didn't have the tools to process it. And when she did pass, I didn't feel that sad about it because at the time, because she had been sick for 3 years at that point, and she had changed so much over those 3 years that I didn't feel as connected to her as I had. And so to me, it was like she passed when I was 12. Because I don't know, one minute I see her and she's completely herself, and the next minute she's completely different. And I still spent a lot of time with her during those 3 years when she was sick, but it was just different. She was a lot slower and just like a lot more not her. She just was never the same person that she was before. And I think she was probably the strongest connection that I had in my family other than my grandfather. And I also think, my grandfather also really was affected by her passing as well. Like, I think that he really, really changed a lot when she passed. And so I just think I never realized that grief could be that delayed. But when I wrote this exercise, I was in tears, and I was shocked. Cause how did I go from writing an exercise to like really being in serious tears? Yeah, life is crazy. Cause I just didn't anticipate one writing exercise making me so emotional. Um, and maybe in a way, she was kind of the glue that kept our family together in a sense. And that was one of the things that she mentioned, that the teacher mentioned. I also was asked by one of the people in the class on Zoom on the chat, but I never responded, which is, why do you feel disconnected? Well, I kind of just explained it, but I just I felt like I was always different. I was a very sensitive kid, very sensitive teenager, very sensitive adult. And being in a minority family and being sensitive is not a good combination. Because don't nobody care about your feelings. And a lot of the times, crying or showing emotion is seen as being weak. And part of the reason I think I struggled with my self-esteem and my confidence for so long is because I always received the message that being vulnerable was wrong. And I already had a natural vulnerability from as a baby, okay? But there's nothing wrong with being sensitive. It just means that things touch you a little bit more. But it also makes you more empathetic to other people. You could put yourself in their shoes a little bit more. But connecting with people is, I don't know, there are just some people that I just click with immediately. Like my roommate, when I was on tour, I connected with her immediately. I was like, that's just not, my friend from high school and I connected, and we still connect every time we talk. But it's just like, there are just some people that I clicked with. And then there are just some people where I just feel like something's off. And I can't really say what it is. And it can be kind of frustrating. But yeah, just learning that I maybe need to still work on processing my grandmother's passing, because I don't think I ever really did. And just, it's not really that I have hard feelings towards my family. I just feel like I don't connect with them, and I don't really know how to, because once you become an adult, you have less and less time to connect because everyone's going their separate ways. And age wise, most of my family is over the age of 60. And then they're young people, but I only really spent time with two of my cousins growing up. And there was a significant age difference with them. One was 5 years older, one was 7 years younger. So it was a little bit of a big age gap. Um, but yeah, I just think that was an interesting development this week. Was, oh yeah, you probably haven't grieved your grandmother's death, and I didn't know. Um, and I think that might be why going home for the holidays is hard for me, because I don't think the holidays were ever the same after she passed. No, after she got sick. Um, it just was different, and I felt like we were more united. The fact that I got to see my mom's brother on a regular basis, um, and that was no more. Once she passed away, like, I literally have not seen him since. And I don't really feel like he is as included as he was when she was alive. Um, yeah. So connecting with family, holidays is not easy for everybody. For me, I will always find somewhere to go for Thanksgiving, because, like, I went to a Friendsgiving with one of my college friends a few years ago. I've gone to Friendsgivings a few times, so I'm like, there's always somewhere to go. And sometimes I just rather, it's about quality, not quantity, and I feel like I have more quality when I'm around other people. And it's just the truth. Like, I'm not being a jerk, but it's like, it is the truth. I feel more connected when I'm with other people, and it kind of was always that way, I guess. Well, since I've been a teen and an adult. Um, but yeah. So I mean, also acknowledge that maybe the holidays is not easy for everybody. Um, Part of the reason moving to New York was not hard for me was because I always felt disconnected from my family. So for me, moving to New York was not a problem, because a lot of people don't want to move because, oh, they're going to miss their family. And if I'm honest, do I miss my family? Not really. I just didn't have a strong enough connection to miss them. Um, I, yeah, just because people are related doesn't mean that you have this attachment to them. And for me, I just don't. And it's not because anything was done to me. It's more or less just like, you connect with who you connect with, and I just didn't connect with my family. And it just is what it is. Like, I don't dwell on it, but it just is. And I think that there has to also be more space for people who don't have the best relationships with their families, because a lot of the times people shame you for that, but it's like, it's not intentional. But if you know that you're doing the inner work and the other people are not doing inner work, it's kind of hard to be around them, because people think therapy is just for people who have mental health issues or just for people who've gone through grief. But technically, my whole family did go through grief when she passed, and yet no one has done any inner work. And it's like, you got to do the inner work. It's necessary for growth and development. And it's hard to be around. The more you grow, it's harder to be around people who aren't growing. And I don't mean like intellectually, I just mean emotionally. Like, becoming self aware and knowing when calling yourself out and being able to say, hey, I could have handled that better. Oh, I could have done this differently. I don't accountability was not something that was strong in my family. I think there was a lot of resentment and a lot of anger between people, and it just never got resolved. And I've just been an observer of it. Not necessarily in it, but like definitely observing everything that's happening and going on around me. And yeah, um, that's pretty much my week in a nutshell. Um, Death really does take a toll. And I don't think people really remember that, especially since it's been so long. I was like, surely I've grieved it. I'm like, no, you haven't. You definitely grieved your friend Daniel to death for sure. But the thing with his was that I had literally just talked to him the night before, and then he died the next day, which was devastating. I was like, well, my grandma, she'd been sick for 3 years when she passed, so it wasn't shocking. It wasn't surprising. But then, and then when she did go from being her normal self to not being someone different, it, I was just too young to be able to process it. I was 12. Like, I wasn't able to process that. Although I don't think too many 12-year-olds would have been able to. So, yeah. Not trying to bring people down. Like, I'm not trying to be a martyr. It's more of just like acknowledging the truth. I think that for me, going home for the holidays just never was something that appealed to me because I never had enough of a relationship with my relatives to really show up in that way. Um, yeah. So have empathy for people who maybe not having a close relationship with their relatives. It isn't always because there's anger or animosity. Sometimes it's just, who do you want to spend your time with? You want to spend time with people who are going to really help you with your own growth. And it's kind of hard to spend time with people who are not growing. And I find it harder and harder. The more that I've gone to therapy, the more that it's harder for me to be around these people. And it's not intentional. Um, and maybe the more work I do, the easier it'll become. But at the moment, I'm at peace with not going home for the holidays. I probably will, at this point, I go home when I know there's like a family emergency, because I know that, everybody is getting older, and so I've now put away money in my savings so that if I have to go home, I go home. But if I don't have to go home, I'm not going home. And I kind of get tired of people asking me that question, like, are you going home? Or when are you coming to Memphis? I'm like, child, I don't plan on coming. At this point, unless somebody has passed, I don't plan on going. And, the person that I talk to the most is my mom and my grandma and my grandfather. But, like, I talk to them on a regular. I spent so much of my youth and my young adulthood with my mom and my grandfather. So at this point, I can't say I didn't have memories with them. I have several. I spent so many days and hours and weeks and months with both of them. So it's like, I can't say I missed out on anything. Um, and I keep in contact with them, but that's all I can do. Um, I don't know. I think sometimes people feel like, well, that's your family and you should just be there. And it's just like, people in the Bible left their families all the time. Like, it was pretty common for you to go and marry and then move away from your family. And honestly, sometimes never see them again. So it's not really a lack of forgiveness. It's more just like, who do I want to spend my time with? Like, I want to spend time with people who I know are going to help me grow as a person. And a lot of the friends I have are always working on themselves and trying to be better. And they're self-aware. And I'm self-aware. And it matters. Like, it does matter to be self-aware, because if you're not self-aware, then you are going to struggle with dealing with others. And so I'm working on my self-awareness so that I can be better with other people. And that's been a process. Um, but I mean, maybe one day I'll get to the point where the healing has gotten to the point where I can be around my relatives. But for now, I'm good. And it doesn't come from a place of hurt. It doesn't come from a place of hate. It just comes from a place of truth. I don't connect. And I probably never did, since I was a child. Um, it just is what it is. So I hope you guys have a lovely week. I am grateful for a lot of things. I'm grateful for friends. Like, I have really amazing friends. I have had really amazing people who have showed up for me in my life. So I'm not bitter. It just, you want to spend time with people who you have things in common with. Um, and that doesn't mean you have to have everything in common. But yeah, it's a little bit of a hard thing to discuss, but I I am grateful for friends. Like, I have really amazing friends, and sometimes I forget that because sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish my family would show up more, but it's just like they can't give you what they don't have, and I just think that you have to move on and be grateful for the people in your life who have shown up. And I really have people who have shown up, and I think that even since I moved to New York, that has been the case. So, and some of these people I met in New York in the last 8 years. And yeah, so sometimes family is not always the people that you were blood related to. Sometimes your family are people who you meet and who really show up, and who really, you can show up for them and they can show up for you. And if you have conflict, you can resolve, and you can talk to them about anything, and feel like you'll be forgiven if you make mistakes. And that isn't easy when it's not your family, but be grateful that the Lord sent people in your life who care and they show up. This has been Southern Girl in the City. I hope you have a lovely week. Happy belated Thanksgiving. Bye.